Hi everybody, Dan Illman, Matt Bernier, the DRFBets race of the day for Friday, January the 25th. We've got Kentucky Derby points on the line in the Smarty Jones Stakes for 3-year-olds going a mile, race number 8 at Oaklawn Park. Before we get started, I want to remind everybody about this great contest on DRF.com presented by our friends at Woodbine. Cast your fan vote for Horse of the Year and enter to win a trip to the Queen's Plate this June at beautiful Woodbine. DRF.com/Eclipse is where you need to go for all of the details. Let's meet the field of 3-year-old, perhaps Arkansas Derby, perhaps Kentucky Derby hopefuls in the Smarty Jones Stakes. You can access free formulator past performances for this race on the Race of the Day event page at DRF.com. Download them, handicap along with us. We'll take the field in post position order, and Matt, the number 1 long-range toddy, is on quite the roll. He has won his last 3 starts, 2 at this distance, draws a nice inside post position, and is slowly making believers out of some people.
Yeah, I think deservedly so. It's kind of hard to continue to argue with this horse when all he does is go out there and seemingly improve each and every start. His most recent run, I can understand anyone that looks at that Springboard Mile and says at the end of the day, he basically had the run of the race. I know for a moment it looked like he may get hemmed in there and not be able to get out, but he did and had plenty of time and went on with it. And I think the argument can also be made that his uncoupled stablemate, Bankit, if he gets out a little bit earlier, maybe he goes and runs down long-range Toddy. At the end of the day, I like the tactical speed this horse brings to it. I like Steve Asmussen. Look, at the end of the day, I understand why this is a very logical contender in here at 4-1.
And if the Derby doesn't work out, there's lots of turf in this pedigree. Perhaps they'll try something else down the road. But he's yet to take a backward step on the Beyer scale and should run well once again. The number 2 is Sleepy Eyes Todd. He's 30-1 on the morning line, coming off a rallying debut win sprinting. But this horse has some pedigree. He's a half to a stakes winning sprinter. But this dam's a half to Danza, who won the Arkansas Derby. And she's also a half to Majestic Harbor, our favorite horse, who won the Grade 1 Gold Cup at Santa Anita. Distance shouldn't be a problem. Is this too much too soon?
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple things that you need to at least throw out there as a possibility. Is it too much too soon? And let's be frank, the fact that he's only raced 1 time, now you're throwing him into the deep end off of a long layoff. Is he actually this good? We don't know yet. Look, it's one thing to go out there and break your maiden year career debut, and that's all well and good. He was almost 30-1 that day. But you brought up the pedigree, and the fact that he sold for $9,000, that to me all of a sudden is a bit of a red flag. Look, maybe he's going to prove me wrong, and he's going to run quite well here in this race on Friday. I just still want to watch.
The horse he beat on Busy came back to run second in a maiden special at Remington with a 67 Beyer. The 3 is Super Steed. The only win came over a sealed sloppy track at Churchill Downs. Maybe you could argue that this horse was compromised just a bit by the lack of early pace in the Sugar Bowl Stakes at the Fairgrounds on December the 22nd. He was even money that day. Didn't like that he showed up with front wraps, however.
And also, when you look at it, he ran into a pretty salty field. Not only is the winner returning in this spot, but the second and third place finishers, they both ran very respectably over the weekend over at the Fairgrounds. So we'll find out what we get from this horse. I think the additional distance is going to be to his benefit. There's a part of me that does wonder about that Beyer 2 starts back. Perhaps it's a little bit high. And if you believe that that's a little bit on the high side and it's going to be more like a mid-70, then guess what? He's kind of plateaued through 3 lifetime starts. He's going to need to improve here to win.
6 Shooter was no match for long-range Toddy and Bankit in the Springboard Mile, but recovered very nicely to win the big drama around a 2-turn 7.5 furlongs last time out at Delta Downs. He got some pace that day. It was probably the right field for him. Now he steps back up with the big boys.
Yeah, the way that I kind of looked at it was I just feel like perhaps it was a matter of taking advantage of lesser company. Now you're going to be facing better horses back out to the mile as opposed to the 7.5. I don't think that's really much of an issue, but really the question for me is he actually this good?
It's the rubber match between Boldor and Super Steed. Boldor beat Super Steed in Boldor's career debut over Fast Going, then was no match for Super Steed over a sloppy track. He's a half to some nice sprint horses, a couple stakes winners, Avarice, Fly E, Dubai. Now he's got a stretch out to a mile. Maybe that's somewhat concerning because his sire Munnings, also known as sort of a sprinty influence, but there's a very good Steve Asmussen fact. Past 3 years with 3-year-old dirt horses stretching out from sprint to routes off 2 to 4 month layoffs, you got 30% winners, a 221 ROI. This colt has some upside, and he sold for a pretty penny back in April.
Yeah, and I suppose this is one of those instances when you look and see the 2 times that he's run up against Super Steed. Yeah, right, the first time he beat him, but then he came back and was kind of handled by him quite easily by more than 6 lengths. I suppose ultimately to me it would come down to price. If you really are going to get something in that 8, 10, 12 to 1 range on this horse where he's not completely exposed, he's actually run 2 pretty good races in the grand scheme of things. And I like the fact that in that second start going up against winners for the first time, he had to come from farther off of it. His only win came in gate to wire fashion. Maybe this isn't the his spot, but I do think that eventually you'll see this horse develop into a good one.
The 6'4" Love of Country has spent most of his career on the turf. No surprise, his dam was a stakes-placed turf router. For Love of Country's a half to the multiple stakes-winning turf sprinter Rapid Rhythm, but he certainly improved over a sealed sloppy track last time out at Churchill Downs, scoring at 23-1, and this horse has some tactical speed.
Yeah, he certainly does. Like you say, that run on dirt for the first time, or the second time, I should say, in the most recent run, he came from just off of a pretty slow pace in the grand scheme of things. Timeform US had the internal splits color-coded blue, and for a moment, it didn't look like he was going to be able to get through the rail. Ultimately, it did kind of open up just enough for him to squeeze through. I like the way that he finished that day. Now, look, it's always a dangerous thing. We say it a number of times. Was it the sloppy sealed track that he appreciated that perhaps some of the rest of the runners in that field didn't? Or is this just a horse that probably wanted the dirt all along? But you brought up the pedigree. There's a real chance that turf is where his home ultimately ends up. I just thought that run was quite good, and he ran into some decent horses that day. 2 next out winners have exited that race.
And we have a positive formulator fact for trainer Jim DeVito. Past 5 years, 3-year-old last out winners on dirt, 31% with a $4.12 ROI. Boy, I needed Bankit last time out on the Springboard Mile at 3-1, and he just didn't break very sharply. He just seemed a bit sluggish out of the gate. I was absolutely stunned that he was last after the first 3/4 of a mile. He was down on the rail and looking for a seam. And all in all, Ricardo Santana did everything right. He had to weave his way through traffic, and he came with a good run to finish second. It at least allayed fears about distance. Even though he won the Sleepy Hollow 2 starts back, it was at a 1-turn mile, and this pedigree might be kind of sprinty. It at least showed that Bankit, with the right situation, could get a 2-turn mile. That last buyer puts him right in the mix.
Yeah, I thought he ran the best race that day. I know he didn't get the money, but at the end of the day, I thought what he had to overcome, as opposed to long-range Toddy, I thought Bankit ran a better race that day. Now, there's a part of me that does wonder a little bit. Each of these past 2 runs, and I know there was an honest pace in that run at Belmont 2 starts back, but he's come from considerably farther back than he had in those first 3 or 4 starts, where he was up there pushing the pace, if not outright on it. There's a part of me now, I hope we haven't all of a sudden developed that sort of one-run kind of style coming from the back, because, again, unfortunately, you're going to be at the mercy of pace and trip in those sort of situations. I want him to at least be relatively close to the pace. I'm not saying be up there pushing it, but be more mid-pack, be 3 or 4 off of it as opposed to 5, 6, 7 out of it.
Number 8, Gray Attempts, your morning line favorite at 5-2. Let's throw up the Timeform US pace situation. As of right now, we've got the 8, the 9, and the 5, and a red bar indicating a fast pace. That might work against Gray Attempt as he stretches out past 6.5 furlongs for the first time. It is worth noting that the 9, Jack Van Berg, is cross-entered in a race at Oaklawn Park on Saturday. Timeform US will update the pace projector after scratches. If Jack Van Berg scratches, that puts Gray Attempt out there on the lead. Couple that with the fact that trainer Jinx Fires won this race in 2016 with discreetness, and the fact that there's a fairly short stretch at a mile at Oaklawn. Maybe this is the spot and the right spot for Gray Attempt to succeed at a mile.
I have to be honest with you, he was the one I was most torn on in this entire race, because not only his price at 5-2 on the morning line, but the fact that that most recent run in that Sugar Bowl, he was out there on such an easy lead. And I know the 2nd and 3rd place finishers, they came back and ran bang-up races in the Lecomte. But to me, part of that was because they had to deal with what they did in that Sugar Bowl. That, you know what, they arguably ran just as well, if not better than Gray Attempt in that Sugar Bowl stakes. Look, he's done nothing wrong in basically 3 lifetime starts. He's been visually impressive in both of the past 2. There is just a part of me that wonders, first time 2 turns, facing good horses, shipping out of the fairgrounds. I know he won at Churchill already as well, but there's still some things being thrown his way that at a short price, I respect him. I think he can win this race. I just don't know that I want to bet him.
Some pedigree questions as well. Still too early to tell what the Graydars are going to be. This dam a half to a couple of stakes-placed sprint runners. Nice to see the bullet workout at Oaklawn Park, however. Jack Van Berg, if he runs in this race, could be a major factor. Not sure on the win end at 20-1, but if he pushes Gray Attempt and knocks him into the ground, it sets things up for the closers. Last time out over the sealed sloppy track, he was on a very fast pace and it didn't work out for him. The problem is, stretching out again, he could be on a fast pace again.
Yeah, there's a few things that I'm interested with this horse. If he runs here, great. If not, I do still wonder going forward. That run 2 starts back was pretty good in the grand scheme of things. That was over Breeders' Cup weekend, and I think there's some ability here. Maybe he didn't love the wet track. I know he has a victory over it, but at the same time, I kind of look at it and say he might actually be a nice horse going forward. I don't love him if he runs here, but you're right. He could be a major fly in the ointment for a horse like Gray Attempt.
Don't think distance will be an issue. Second dam, a graded stakes winner at Oaklawn Park. The dam I have to drama critic, a long-winded grade 3 stakes winner on the turf. Let's take a look at our picks for the Smarty Jones Stakes. Matt, you like For Love of Country. You like the professionalism he showed last time out at Churchill Downs. It's really only a question of if he'll handle fast dirt.
Yeah, 100%. And like you say, I understand some people will look at it and say he had the best of it in that run at Churchill. That's not a comfortable spot for a young horse to go through down there on the inside. And he went through very professionally. I thought it was nice. And to be honest, I liked this horse since he broke his maiden out of Del Mar in his second lifetime start. I think there's some ability here. Maybe this isn't the spot. Maybe this is going to be too tough. I was torn between he and Bankit. Ultimately, the price is going to be better on the 6. I went 6-7-1-8.
I'm going to go with Gray Attempt, but I need Jack Van Berg to scratch. If Jack Van Berg scratches, I think Gray Attempt can establish the early lead, slow down the pace, and sprint home in the short stretch. Again, like the bullet workout over the course, 8-1-7-3 for me in the $150,000 Smarty Jones Stakes. It is your Friday DRF Bets race of the day. And remember to get your vote in for Horse of the Year. It's a contest on DRF.com presented by Woodbine. Cast your fan vote. Enter to win a trip to the Queen's Plate this June at beautiful Woodbine. All the details at DRF.com/eclipse. An approximate post time for this Kentucky Derby prep race on Friday. The Smarty Jones Stakes, 3:52 Central. Best of luck.